Hey, it's Ben, and today I'm with Tyr Throne. And Tyr is a award-winning choreographer and director, also the founder of Somalogy, the art and science of the living body. And so, Tyr, I'm curious. We have a lot of ground to cover here, but how exactly did your work evolve?
Oh, well, it's great to be here and happy to answer your questions. So, when I was young, I was an athlete and very involved with martial arts. And then I
Mhm.
went to university. I was interested in pre-medicine. I was for surgery and also psychiatry. And then I fell in love with dance and with ballet. And I had a wonderful career as a ballet dancer and a company that toured internationally. And
Mhm.
then while I was doing that, I started to work with a lot of injured dancers. And then they started to send me injured other athletes. And then, oh, can you help my grandmother? Her back is in pain and things like that. And
Mhm.
so I just really love helping people. It's really satisfying and really beautiful. And then I created Somalogy that way. And then I created another work called Youthing, which is how they're movements to how to improve your posture and help you feel younger and look younger. And um, and then I started teaching in America, Germany, Italy, France, Switzerland, Mexico, Costa Rica, Japan, Korea, and my most influential teachers, which I'm so grateful for, were Ida Rolf, which I certified in, and Moshe Feldenkrais, I'm certified in that. Ruthie Alan, Bones for Life, which helps for osteoporosis and osteopenia. And then the influential dance teachers, I learned a lot from my own body. I call it my laboratory,
Mhm.
were Martha Graham, Gabrielle Roth, Jennifer Muller, David Howard, Robert Christopher, and also I studied with Upledger in cranial sacral therapy,
Mhm.
and John Parakos, who was the founder of Core Energetics,
Mhm.
was a client of mine for many, many years. And we also taught together in yeah, and we would talk so much and about the what he liked about my work is it was a combination of the physical work that affected the people emotionally, psychologically, the objective work that affected the subjective.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, that's quite an extensive background. It's pretty amazing. And of all the people that I've met over the years, I find that you have one of the most extensive understandings of the human body, its structure, the musculature, um, and I was very much impressed with that. Um, my own background, being trained by a traditional Native American doctor,
Mhm.
medicine man, but at the same time, like as I work with people, I always encourage people to combine the most effective therapeutic modalities because there's no one thing that's going to do everything. And so we've done a number of sessions. I've received a number of sessions from you, and part of my how do you say, I'm always looking to close the gaps in a sense. Like we all have blind spots or gaps that um, where we're disconnected from parts of ourselves and uh, parts of our bodies, parts of our psyches. We're not very integrated. We carry a lot of emotional wounding. There's a lot of, again, numbing, disconnect. And so one of the things I appreciate so much about your work is that it was instrumental in taking me into areas that I hadn't um, fully touched upon. Maybe
Mhm.
I had sort of, um, but here I'm um, creating this course. It's an ongoing process, to help people that are going through breakup and divorce, to struggling with patterns of abandonment, rejection, unrequited love, um, and these patterns are endemic for so many people, and
Mhm.
they struggle. And a big part of the challenge is that many people are so disconnected emotionally, but also from their physical bodies. And a lot of that emotional wounding is held in the body. And so, one of the things that I enjoyed so much in um, receiving the sessions from you is that it really helped me to um, like, okay, on one hand, I'm doing vision quests, go out the 4 days and nights to fast without food and water. At times I've done, what's generally commonly referred to as deep tissue body work. But there's a
Mhm.
way in which that you were able to really get in there. And again, the way the body is structured, there are these ways that we're so twisted up and contracted. And you have this amazing ability to just open the body into its organic, natural form. And in doing so, there's this release of like a lot of the emotions that were trapped in the body, for years, decades. And and those emotions would come out. And
Mhm.
I would work with my own meditation practices. When you would be doing the body work and you'd release, um, these areas of, this, chronic constriction, these like, you know, places where I'd gotten bound up as we all do. And then there would be all this emotion surface that I hadn't been able to access otherwise. And so then I'd do my own meditation practice and go directly into those emotions. And so, I found it just extraordinarily helpful. And when people are, we're in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and when people are going through a breakup or divorce or dealing with some other debilitating heartache, whatever, depending on where we are, there are different resources available. And um, so this is one of the reasons I want to introduce you, bring you on today, is because I feel that you offer a very valuable resource that I want to share with other people that I'm working with who are uh, a part of my course that I'm offering. But can you talk some about we've spoken about this in sessions. Um, you pointed out some of the differences between the somalogy that you do and other forms of body work, just what people normally think of as therapeutic massage or deep tissue body work. Can you um, go a little in depth and describe the difference?
Sure. Um, well, first, thank you for your heartfelt appreciation. And I'm just very grateful for my teachers, and I'm just very curious about anatomy and psychology and how they work together. And
Mhm.
um, so, one of the one of the things I developed because I was teaching all around the world, and I would try to learn as much as I could of each language, was a system where people would set goals physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And my father was a scientist and my mother's an art teacher, and I'll always be both. That's why I call this the art and science of the living body. Soma means living body, and ology means science. And there are wonderful uh, ways to release trauma with uh, many different kinds of like core energetics, Reichian, uh, deep tissue, other things like that. But I remember one time in Germany, this white-haired woman was saying, oh, I did all that, and it all came back, and just popped out of my mouth. What if you could not only untwist the body, but untwist the thinking that twisted the body?
Mm.
And it was so funny. She staggered backwards and landed against the wall, slid down onto the ground, and passed out for 3 hours. And I
Mm.
was like, I made sure she was okay. And then I continued teaching. I put a blanket over her, just let her rest. And then and then she got up and left. And I thought, oh, it wasn't for her or something. But a
Mm.
month later, she showed up in Switzerland in the training. And so what I did is I created this structure of a list of physical, emotional, and spiritual. We can put a link in it below the interview if people are curious about it.
Sure.
And it said you pick goals like physically. For example, I want my neck to feel less stiff, the shoulders to feel less tense, um, my my posture to feel less bent and more upright. And then emotionally, I'd like to feel less fear and more love, and less hiding and more expressive, and less controlling and more accepting, for example. And spiritually, I'd like to feel less confused and more clarity, and more less distanced and more intimate, and things like this. And when you set up your goals, I can really let go of my ego and be in service. So I
Mm.
can say, well, how can I help Ben feel that? Or how can I help Mary feel that? Because one of the things I wanted to do, it was just a mental exercise. My father and I would engage in these kinds of things, was like, how could I, instead of like Rolfing someone or Feldenkraising someone, how could I bend Ben and marry Mary? So
Mm.
how could I help Ben to become more the way that he would like to be, and Mary the way that he would like to be? Because a lot of our physical pain is the difference between how we are and how we would like to be.
Mm.
So I just wanted to make it more uh, the session really tailored, and then my 40 years of experience can show up at fixing problems. Like a dancer that is so depressed because they can't jump off one leg, I can help them to jump again, and then they can do what they love. Or someone emotionally is very shut down, and they say, it's very hard for me to make intimate connections, and I can help them to open up. So the and it was just it was humility, in that I would just look at each person as my teacher,
Mm.
and the people would stand in front of me and say, I give you permission to look at me, and these are the things I would help with, and what do you see, and how can you help me? And so with that attitude of everyone being my teacher, because like I have to understand Ben to figure out how Ben's goals, how I can help him with his goals based on my knowledge, and which came from my wonderful teachers, and my experience, which came from fixing the same kinds of problems many times.
Mm.
Um,
Wow. Um, I'm curious, can you describe, from your standpoint, we possess different kinds of gifts, and so there's ways in which we're able to look into the body and mind. And I know I have my way, but as we've done sessions, I would listen to you, how you would describe how you're able to see into people's bodies, and you're able to perceive a lot of things that the vast majority of people don't. You know, so I was wondering if you could describe, like, say, the emotional wounding that begins to develop in childhood. Could be from experiences such as abandonment, or kinds of abuses some of us suffer, even bullying, and but how that carries over into our adult lives, and And when it carries over into our adult lives, how is that specifically going to affect our adult intimate relationships?
Oh, great question. Well, it's actually two questions. So first, like, how do I see?
Hmm.
And it's a really funny question because so most people are so busy chattering in their head that
Hmm.
they don't really see, you know. So what I what I do is I watch very carefully anatomy, and I have over many years of research and also helping release trauma, I've seen that it's stuck because of physical and mental unconscious habits.
Hmm.
So, for example, when someone walks in the room, I'll see, their right arm is swinging more ideally, and the left arm is very held. And, I'll just say, how's your shoulder? And they'll go like, oh, how did you know I had something wrong with my left shoulder? Or I can see if, what, because I've been so fortunate in to work with like some of the best athletes in the world, ballet
Hmm.
dancers, martial artists, all different kinds of artists, champion marathon runners. And so what I do is I help them, but I say, could you please walk? Could you please run? Could you please do your sport? And I've done so many different kinds of sports and things myself. And so I'm looking at what's ideal and what's not. So
Hmm.
I say when I'm trying to teach this to the doctors and therapists who are my students, they want to learn how to do what I'm doing. I say, well, what would Saint Ben look like as a joke? And
Yeah.
like where is he distorted and where is he holding and where is not moving when he breathes or when he walks? What
Hmm.
like most people I look with a lot of compassion, but most people look a little bit like a car accident. They're smashed up and hit. And I also worked for 20 years in mental institutions with like not guilty by reason of insanity. I was a dance therapist, and uh, mental institutions, not guilty by reason of insanity, prisons, autistic uh, uh, children and orphans and all different, like the most distorted and twisted beings, which are usually locked up and you can never see them. So I would go there and just teach them movement and try to help them to be more comfortable and more sane in their bodies on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I was ballet master. And so I would look at these little children, and because of working with the untwisting, the very crazy and very old people, like psychiatric geriatrics, for example, I would look at this 9-year-old child and I see as she stands this way, she could maybe age this way.
Hmm.
But if I can help her to just open up her posture, stand a little better, she'd have a different future. Now, of course, I don't know exactly what the future could be, but for example, if someone's posture is like this, they age quicker because the weight of the head is pulling on the spine. It's harder to breathe. The cardiovascular and pulmonary functions are compromised, and things like this. And if I can improve the person's posture, they breathe better, the circulation to the brain is improved, and they're mechanically, biologically younger than this is biologically, mechanically older.
Hmm.
What's the age difference of that? So working in this way, which is just, I'm just a nerd. I'm a nerd about anatomy and the uh, emotional interconnection, the physical, emotional, and spiritual interconnection. But it also comes from some questions that I think are very important to consider for any therapist who's interested in working with this. Uh, how is trauma held onto? Why doesn't it disappear quickly and easily, spontaneously? Why does it lower the quality of life for most people for the rest of their lives?
mm,
So, what I addressing one of those questions, like why doesn't trauma heal and disappear quickly and easily, spontaneously? From research and fixing things, I found that it's because physical and mental habits that cause the retention of trauma, they're unconscious. And so they're blind spots that can be easily triggered and cause suffering.
mm,
So if you're doing like deep tissue or rolfing or other wonderful ways to dig out like held things, you can release a lot of emotions. But
mm,
when you set up the physical, emotional, and spiritual goals, the people are reflecting on those. So they're present in the session and in the after work of the session. So, like, oh, well, also, I do something that's really funny, which you're familiar with. I'll only change one side of the body first.
mm,
So the person will want to be like less pain in the neck and shoulders, better posture, for example, and be uh, less afraid and more open. And so I'll do that on one side of the body and they'll feel it and they'll say, oh, wow. I say, how does it feel? And they say, oh, this side, the neck feels so much better. The shoulder feels better. I feel more open. I say, how do you feel emotionally different? They say, I feel more courageous or something. And I'll say, how does the other side feel? And they'll go, they'll get insights into the what's happening and they'll say, oh, this side feels really paranoid and afraid and it's so uncomfortable in my neck and shoulders. And I call that, it's a funny invention, I call it safe schizophrenia. It's not really schizophrenia, but but it feels so different. And what it is, it's the old you like this and the more untwisted, I call innocent,
mm,
just more ideal uh, physical body. So what happens is there's a lot of flashes of insight that happen because I can make jokes like if the I can say which side is more of a neck pain factory, and you'll laugh and you'll see the blueprint of how you make neck pain because you can feel a neck that feels wonderful. They're both you.
mm,
And then I can say, well, I could say, well, how would the two sides age differently over the next 20 years? And you'll go like, whoa, this would be like down, and this would have a better future, you know? So there's a lot of a possibility for insight when you can see how, but it's not all your faults. Things happen, every time someone says I don't love you or you get fired or you really go for something and you don't get it, there's wounding or bullying when you're in school or bullying from a father or brutal beatings. In my case, my father was a wonderful father, a very intelligent and scientist and artist, and until he became alcoholic. And then he would beat my mother, and I would run up to him as a skinny little 9-year-old and swear at him and get him pissed off. So he chased me. And if I could get out the door into the forest with my dog, he'd keep drinking and pass out and forget about it in the morning. But sometimes I couldn't open the door in time and he'd beat me to the ground and stomp on me. And I became a martial artist and was beating up everyone in America in my weight class. Who was I fighting? I was really fighting my father.
mm,
But when I went to India and I was Walt and all these other things and I was working with myself psychologically and I was just freeing myself from all of the pain. Like, what's your history of violence? I
mm,
don't mean necessarily being beaten. Criticism is a violence.
mhm,
Not being respected is a violence. Our current education system, there are fabulous teachers. My mom is an amazing teacher. People show up at the door, knocking on the door and thank her for being a teacher. But the whole education system needs a revision. It's it's very abusive at this time. You know, not letting children move, trying to suppress children. It's like an old way of education that's 100 years old. I was out in the forest and saw an old schoolhouse. It looked just the same as a schoolhouse now. You know, desks in rows. And we need it. What's missing in society is where people are trained in the map of themselves. So what happens in this work is you're given a movement experiment, and in the youthing part of the work, as you do the movement experiment, you become aware of your bad habits and how you're holding or restricting yourself. And those ways that we hold and restrict our body allow the the different way of thinking and feeling in the world. Like, oh, if a woman's like this, she'd be like, oh, all men are terrible. You can't trust anybody and stuff like that. And this is not really conducive for a relationship. And then if she's doing some movements, or if I'm doing the pressure kind of body work to change the structure, and she changes her structure like this, she could go, yeah, a lot of men are assholes, but that's a nice one, or that's a good one. Do you understand what I mean? And what's the difference in attractiveness? Is someone's like this, or if someone's like this? What's the difference in her or his? And it doesn't matter whether you're gay or straight or trans or anything. You know, these are basic physical things. We all want love. We all want to give love. We all want to receive love. We all want to be healthy. We all want to be happy. And see, imagine how your unresolved trauma is kind of like, and if it's locked in your unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and it hurts you. Imagine like a wounded, angry, suffering inner child trying to drive the car of your life while they're locked in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's going to be the result? It's going to be, your life is going to be a mess of accidents and sufferings and creating pain for yourself and your personal and professional relationships. So the reason trauma is so important, you know, I've worked with soldiers who were suicidal from PTSD, from horrible trauma, and also people who were suicidal from very bad sexual abuse and or bullying, beating, sadistic fathers, things like that. So that held in the body, it's hard to release on your own. You can do a lot of things, and you know, sports, movement, everything is great. But I just wanted to address it very scientifically and very precisely by looking at what would the skeleton do. Like, if let me ask you a funny question: which is neurotic, your bones or your muscles?
I think it would express both ways.
No, your bones are not neurotic at all. Your
Uh,
bones don't have nerves. They
yeah.
don't. I mean, they have some nerves, but they don't have. They can't move. They
Mm.
can't distort in and of themselves. It's all your. I'm not saying you're neurotic. I'm saying we're all neurotic.
Yeah.
But the muscles distort the bones and the structure emotionally. And
Mm-hmm.
so the more emotional damage or trauma that the person has, the and the more worries and the if they have a negative parents or a negative schooling, the more they'll be twisted and distorted and they'll suffer. They
Mm-hmm.
will suffer emotionally. Their attractiveness goes down, their ability to be productive goes down, their quality of life goes down. And
Mm-hmm.
that, I feel compassion for that. I feel empathy for that. So what I do I treat each person with empathy and compassion, and I just see how can, what do they need to learn in order to have more comfort in their body and more comfort in gravity, in the world, in their environment. And when you feel more comfortable in your body and more comfortable in your relationship with gravity, for example, if your head's relationship with gravity with this, you're going to have to be tense in your neck and your back every time you're sitting or standing.
Mm.
And you're going to have a lower quality of life because your head weighs a lot more. Here, your head weighs much less. Here it weighs up to 60 pounds
Mm.
by the leverage on your back. So if I gave you a 60-pound bag of potatoes and you couldn't put it down and you had to carry it around for the rest of your life, that's not a good quality of life. That doesn't help you. You see, if you can take someone from their head feeling heavy to their head feeling light, what's the subjective experience? Life is easier.
Mm.
That's huge. And if you go to a party and you see someone who's like, oh, life is difficult, do you want to get married to me? Or someone else has this feeling of ease and comfort in their own skin and comfort about themselves, which is more attractive to you if you're going to a party? Do you know? And which life would you rather have? You know, most people look like an old boat, that's leaking and falling apart, and their vital energies are draining, and it's heavy and difficult to move. But how would your life be different if you could have a much better vessel that was sleek and strong and graceful and moved powerfully? How would that affect your charisma? How would that affect your creativity, your productivity, your attractiveness?
Mm.
Through these very precise scientific movements, they illuminate your bad habits, which are blind spots, and they allow you to learn new, more healthy ways of moving and feeling, and therefore thinking about yourself and your relationships with life, gravity, and with others. Because stiff, uncomfortable holding tensions are keep the trauma stuck.
Mm.
And if they're gently transformed, they are gently transformed by these movements into a more comfortable and pleasant feeling in your body, which transforms your thinking to be more healthy and productive.
Mm.
Slowing down and sensing the interesting movement experiments quickly creates a more healthy map of your body and your understanding of life and what more healthy relationships would be with yourself and your environment and your personal and professional relationships. For, ex- for example, if someone's holding on this trauma, they expect bad things because bad things happen to create the trauma. And if they change their physical body, the way they feel in their physical body, they feel differently. When you feel differently, you think differently.
Mm.
Um, would you like to try one of the movement experiences so you can feel the benefits for yourself? And would the people in the audience like to try this? Something so they can feel.
Sure.
So this won't work unless you actually try the experiment. So just try the experiment for yourself if you're listening and following along. It's very easy. It's very easy. You can do it right at the computer. So uh, first, just feel something so you can feel how you feel now, and then you can feel the difference later. Okay? So
Okay.
just feel how you're sitting. Don't change the way you're sitting. Just your notice your habit of sitting. You've sat this way a lot, and just notice how you're sitting. how your contact is with the chair, um, what you're doing with your arms and legs at this moment. Don't change it, just understand it. What's your relative age at this moment? How do you feel physically, emotionally, spiritually at this moment? There's no right answers. Just feel how you feel now. And then just turn your head both directions. And just notice which way is easier to turn your head. Is it a little easier at the beginning of turning your head to turn to the left or the right? And what asks you to stop? Just notice how you're turning your head now. How do you feel in your neck, your shoulders, your back, your whole body?
Mm.
And then just stand for a moment and just notice how you feel in standing.
Stand. Okay.
What's your posture like? How do you feel about yourself? What's your relationship with gravity and the ground at this moment?
Mm.
And then just walk around for a moment and just notice how you feel in walking. How do you feel walking? And then have a seat. And you don't have to remember perfectly, just whatever you remember is fine. And you feel how you feel now, then you can feel the difference after this very short experiment. So then bring one hand to your head and the other hand to your hips. Sit on the front edge of your chair and with your whole feet on the ground and your legs a little bit open, comfortably open. And then just turn your head and let your arm connect your head and your body and enhance the movement of your body. And with your hand on your hip, let your hip move a little bit and let your legs participate in turning your head and your body. And just feel what that's like. Very easy, very comfortable. Don't try to do it as far as you can or as hard as you can. Just see if you can more easily let more of your body participate in the turn. Very comfortable. Feel a pleasant movement in your ribs, your spine, your back. Very gentle, very pleasant. And then look up a mile, a kilometer, and look left and right, a kilometer, a mile. And then just rest your arms and just feel what's happening now. How are you sitting differently? How's any changes in your posture, your sense of yourself? And then turn your head and see if more of your body moves now when you turn your head. Do you allow more movement in your pelvis and in your body as you turn your head now? Is that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Now, go back to the way you did it first and don't let your body move and just turn your head. How
Mm-hmm.
much of your body is suppressed? You feel that's a habit, is suppression. Now, in that's what in orthopedic medicine and in psychiatric medicine we call that suppression. You know what it leads to?
Right.
It rhymes. What rhymes with suppression?
Depression.
Yes. So the more suppressed, when I was working in the mental institution, the more suppressed people were, the more depressed they were.
Mm-hmm.
This is a sad example. I'm sorry for this example, but how much would you have to beat a dog until it only turned its head like this?
Mm.
That would be horrible. But most people are so suppressed in their body, they don't move their arms when they walk, they don't move their body when they turn their head. But when I'm turning my head, there's a natural movement in my ankles, my legs are participating, the knees are moving, the hips are moving, the whole body's allowed to move. You have about 500 muscles. And if you're using 475 muscles to hold, and you're only allowing less than 25 muscles to move in your head and neck, that's a lot of work of holding. So if you're doing that all the time, see, if I'm not doing that and I'm walking along and everything's allowed to move easily and I'm not suppressing anything, and someone's suppressing 80% of their body, how much energy do they have left for living? 20%.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing that and you're allowing your whole body to move easily, you have 80% more energy for life. This is huge.
Mm.
And the other problem that you were talking about, that you're interested in about the trauma, is this creates the stuckness.
Mm.
So if you're coming from a session or you're coming from a youthing class and you're a man walking down the street and you say, my gosh, I never knew hips moved like that when you walked. You go, that feels really cool, you know, or a woman, it's a very different feeling when you understand. And, we need nerds. If something's wrong with the computer or internet, I got to go to an IT guy, right? But if you're feeling uncomfortable in your body, or there's terrible traumatic things that happen to you, that's the kind of thing that I love to help people with.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to try with the other hand?
With the other hand?
Yeah.
Sure.
Bring your other hand to your head,
Okay.
and one hand to your head and the hand to your hip. And as you turn, which leg helps you turn to the right, and which leg pushes a little more to have you turn to the left. It's very subtle. Let your hips turn a little bit in the same direction as your head. Let your ribs, let your whole body move very comfortably,
Mm-hmm.
very gently. Just see, where are you not moving, and could you ask it to move subtly and pleasurably?
Mm-hmm.
And then look up a mile and out to the right and left a mile, and release your arms and feel, how's your posture changed? How many people feel they're sitting up taller and straighter or easier?
Mm-hmm.
It's less holding down. And when you turn, I make a joke, can more of you come to the party? Instead of more of you not moving,
Mm-hmm.
can more of you come to the party? Let's go back to education. If you criticize children, I had a great martial arts teacher. He'd say, kick me with your right leg. No, your other right leg. It's very interesting. He didn't say, oh, you're a stupid, horrible person. I said kick with the right leg and you kick with the left leg. They'd be like this. We were really good because he never did that. You kick me with the right leg. No, your other right leg. Ah, that's it. That's the right leg. Yeah, that was great. So he would catch what you did doing. I teach ballet like this also. You catch what the people are doing good. You're clear about what they don't want and clear what they do want. And when they're winning, help them and encourage them. So you're increasing the spontaneity in the body.
Mm.
Then you want to try a little more?
Yeah, sure.
So with both hands on your head,
Okay.
start to turn. Now, what's interesting about having both hands on your head? There's more weight. Feel how your legs have to work more. They can't be dead. They have to participate more.
Mm-hmm.
And more of your body starts to move. And then reach up a mile and to the sides a mile. And feel, are your legs, see, when the legs are active, they uplift you like a fountain of youth. They're mechanically uplifting you.
Mm-hmm.
How much taller do you feel now than when we started? And
But
then do an experiment. Go back to when you were shorter
Mhm.
And when you were holding your body and you didn't let your legs were dead and your body wasn't allowed to move and you only turned your head.
Mm.
Go ahead. How do you feel about yourself?
It feels more contracted that way.
Yeah, and you're suppressed.
Mhm.
And then bring both hands to your hips
Mhm.
and turn your hips with your legs. And can you see more of the room?
Mhm.
Can you not only see like tigers if one was going to come, but also someone to fall in love with? Can you see more?
Mhm.
And then look up a mile and to the side a mile. And then just sit and feel. And what's the relative age difference you feel now compared to when you started? And when you turn, can you see more of the room? Could you see more of birds or rabbits? Is your visual field expanded? You feel?
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, that's a different quality of life. See, if someone's all suppressed and holding and bent and collapsing, and they can barely turn the head, you say, "Oh, look at the beautiful birds," and they look up, try to look at the birds, and it hurts their neck, and they go, "Oh, to hell with the birds! I don't want to look up." You know, it's a depressing way of living. But if they're if the through these series of scientific experiments, movement experiments, if the legs are active and uplifting the person, they can go, "Wow, the birds are beautiful, the mountains are beautiful." You know, and what's the difference in those two beings, attractiveness, creativity, productivity,
Mm.
relative age? It's quite huge. You know, and then just take a moment to stand and feel the difference.
Stand.
Yeah, I
Good.
just stand and feel the difference. Everybody stand and feel the difference. And just walk around. How are you walking now? Can your hips move? Can your hips turn? Can your ribs turn? Can your shoulders turn while you walk? Is your posture, how's your posture different? Is it easier to move through the world now? That's interesting.
Definitely.
No, so I always promise 10 years younger, and just in terms of looking and feeling, not uh, chronological age, but biological and mechanical age. And it's all videotaped. You know, you can see it. Everybody's laughing in the training. There's 20 people who go from walking like this to walking just completely different. And I joke and I say, "How's this cocktail party difference, or what's the age difference?" And they say, I always promise 10 years younger, but I always over deliver. So everybody's saying, "Oh, I look 20 years younger in this video now," you know, and I feel much better. They and they come back the next day and they go, "Oh, my relationship with my husband improved, or with my wife." You know, they're because it is the science that does it, because you're working on real things, the physical body, the skeleton, the muscles, the organization. In medicine it's called physiology, which is just a fancy word for organization. So
Mm.
we're working on these real things. It's not, it's not theoretical. It's not, it's actual scientific affecting of the object. But what I'm very curious about, and I love exploring, is the way that when you change the objective physical body, how you feel subjectively different emotionally and spiritually.
Mhm. There's a very palpable sense too, the difference where um, there's ways in which we become very congealed, and I think there's
Habits.
combination.
Yeah.
Huh?
Habits.
Habits. There's a combination of factors too. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one, many of us go through life and we tend to numb out or suppress or disconnect emotionally, And so that creates congealing. We're hyped up on caffeine to keep ourselves going, and partly because we don't allow ourselves to get enough sleep.
Your
And
caffeine creates
there's
a
a
little
lot.
distance from your real feelings.
Yeah, it does.
You know,
Yeah.
your body's like, I'm tired, and you go, oh, heck with you. You can't be tired now. Drink a lot of caffeine. You have to get to work. You know, so
Yeah.
there's that creates a separation. I
Mhm.
drink a little green tea, but I think that you want to listen to your body when it's tired. Rest. You know,
Mhm.
and but and also what you're saying, the numbing. So when the more suppression there is, the
Mhm.
more, I'm going to use a rather strong word, dead. The more
Yeah.
deadened or numbed the body becomes. The more like if I look someone and they're turning their body or they're moving and their legs are, I'll say it's a strong word, dead, but they're
Yeah.
really just suppressed to the point where they're inactive, they're impotent, they're not potent, they're not active. And the
Mhm.
difference when the body becomes active, it becomes much more potent. And the metaphors of potency, potential, possibility, those are all enhanced in many wonderful ways that I don't control. I don't control anybody. I'm just a resource. I'm
Mhm.
just giving people new resources in their body, which is one way of looking at it's improving your map. See, we're based in New York City right now,
Mhm.
but and a map of New York City is fantastic to have. But what good does it do you in Berlin?
Mhm.
None. But what about a better map of Ben? What about a
Mhm.
better map of your body? What about a better understanding of yourself? That's cool because you can take it to India. You can take it to Bali. You can take it anywhere. And it immediately improves your quality of life. So habits, let's look really carefully at what habits are. In in science, we call them generalizations. And
Mhm.
it means, like, for example, you don't have to learn the alphabet every day. You don't have to tie your shoes every day. You've learned them and they become generalized in your brain and you can use them. That's fantastic. You really want to be able to use the alphabet to read and write and speak. And you
Mhm.
really want to be able to put your shoes on so you can go enjoy nature. And you want to learn a lot of things. And it actually, in terms of science, those are all habits. You have the habit of the alphabet. But
Mhm.
there's also a lot of bad habits, like inhibiting yourself. And a lot of aging is, I know this will sound kind of controversial, uh, but let me explain. A lot of aging is just bad habits until the person is just more and more and more limiting themselves until they're standing at the corner and they'll go, oh my God, there's the bus. If I could run to the bus, I could get to the party and have a good time. But I
Mhm.
can't run anymore. Well, I'll just go home. But if you if you are, I don't mean run fast. I mean, just like, an 80-year-old person who's fit can run a little bit to get to the bus. Um, so if you're redesigning things, you're elevating the quality of life, and this is what and and you so these habits that we all have a million habits, like everyone who does the experiment of turning their head, they say, well, I could have turned my whole body. And I'm like, but you didn't, you know, that's your habit. So they're all, so it's not critical. It's just what will enhance it. What would be moving more beautifully? Like I was in Berlin, teaching in Berlin, and there was this beautiful young black woman with really poor clothes and a really beat up rolling bag. She was wearing like a tracksuit, and I was walking behind her, and I was like, "Oh my God, she's going to run in the Berlin Marathon, and she's going to do really well." Because her hips and her shoulders were just, while she was walking, moving really beautifully. And all the German and American people were like, walking like this and holding their suitcases like this. It's just very different.
Mm.
I could tell she probably trained barefoot, the way that her feet were moving very naturally, and her knees and her hips. And so, I'm just curious and respectful. I didn't bother her or talk to her or anything, but I'm just observing and learning. I'm just so curious all the time.
Mm.
And,
So we talked a little about some of the ways that um, the interaction between men and women in relationships, and whereas dating, men being in a position tending to do more. There's still more the expectation that men initiate. It's not always the case,
mm,
and and it kind of hurts that men experience in relationships. And then on the other hand, um, the way women are um, experience emotional wounding in relationships, and sometimes the shoulders becoming a little more concave or whatever. I think you mentioned that before. And can you describe some of the specifics that you've observed in working with men and women as it pertains to the heartache that they carry?
well, you're talking about cisgender, like normal heterosexuality, and I would like to expand that to include the whole spectrum, whether someone is
Sure.
straight or gay or bi or the entire spectrum, trans, everything,
Okay.
sexual, everything. So
Mhm.
well, and those have existed throughout all of evolution. There's animals are on the spectrum also. Bonobos do all kinds of gay behavior as well as heterosexual behavior.
Mhm.
If you're just talking about cis normal heterosexual
I
uh,
was sort of
behavior,
starting out there, but it's
but
um,
let me talk about that first. So
mhm,
uh, there was a tendency to the men being more predatory
mhm,
and active, and
mhm,
the woman being more defensive,
mhm,
because it's a different investment. If the man makes love, he could have hundreds of babies. But the woman, it's like 18 years of investment. So
mhm,
there's much more cautiousness originally.
mhm,
Um, Now that we have birth control and other things like that, there's a lot more, uh, and women are. We need equality. I believe in equality, and I think diversity is healing and healthy. So as women are becoming much more empowered, and I'm doing everything I can for that as well. Um, on an individual, like when I'm working, I'm doing as much as I can to improve Ben's ecology, the ecology of Ben's physical body, the ecology of this world, and the relationship with the world. And I'm doing that with each woman to empower them also, to empower each person in whatever way they would like. I use your goals.
mhm,
So, but like I was talking about a little bit earlier, the way that you walk down the street, people are very sensitive to the nonverbal. Nonverbal has been tested to have more impact than the verbal. So
mhm,
they're watching your posture, the way you move, your confidence, your comfortability. You know, when you watch someone walk or you watch someone dance, you get a sense of what they would be like as a lover or as a to be in a relationship with.
mhm.
And the way they breathe, the way that they hold themselves. The more suppressed you are in your body, when you're in a conversation with someone, they're going to feel that, and they're going to feel uncomfortable. If you feel uncomfortable in your body, they're going to feel uncomfortable in their body. It's not attractive,
Right.
repulsive, if I wanted to use a stronger word. And as you feel more comfortable in your body, you're more healthy in your body. You're also more healthy in your thinking, and you can have more empathy Because if I'm all holding and stuff like that, I'm like, is that person lying or telling the truth? You know, am I feeling uncomfortable in my body because of my tension in my body, or because they're dangerous emotionally or physically? Do you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
if I'm more comfortable in my body and I'm not getting all this like nervous tension signal in my brain from my body, which is makes the brain very busy and hard to perceive. If I'm more relaxed and comfortable in my body, I'm like, I can sense better. Are they lying or telling the truth? Or are they completely delusional? They have no idea what the truth or reality is. Um, I learned a lot working, teaching in the mental institutions.
Mhm.
So, uh, in in turn, the best thing that someone can do if they want to have better relationships, if they really want to fall in love with someone, is to work on themselves, is to get more comfortable in their own skin, to love themselves more, to release the trauma, to become less neurotic. I joke around sometimes, less neurotic is more erotic. Or some people, they just find really kinky people. Do you know what I mean? And they find a match that way. I,
Mhm.
but I'm talking about. I just want to talk about what I can, like, what's missing in society that my work, the humble little, what's my humble little contribution to humanity? So we're living in a more and more disembodied society. Like I call this a Monday head. You know what a Monday head is? A Monday head is when the head is coming on Monday and the body comes on Tuesday.
Mhm.
And how many people do you see like that? Walk down the street in your city, wherever you are, Berlin or New York or San Francisco, or you'll see a lot of people like that. And it's because of time and money, but it's also phones and computers.
Mhm.
This creates like a separation and an uncomfortable feelings in the body. And so more through this work, it's very fast. People can feel. How long did it take you to feel like in that experiment? Usually people say they feel 10 years younger or something. That took us like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10
Mhm.
years younger in 10 minutes, and just freer and better. It's fast. You know why? Because it's so slow.
Mm.
The more you slow down and sense yourself, the faster you can change. Why? Because you can see your bad habit and say, wow, that feels nice to let my hips move when I turn my head. That's a pleasure. Why would I stop something that feels so nice? Now, what's going to happen to your charisma if your hips move better? What's going to happen to your healthy sexuality if your hips move better?
Mhm.
Interesting questions. So what I want to do is just be a resource where I'm giving people experiments that they can learn something about themselves and improve their maps. And you'll see, like when you try, I call dead fly. So if if you had a dead fly in your mouth, what would you want to do? Spit it out. So
Yeah.
what we do is we dance back and forth between like how you turned your head at first, and then in a new way, an easier way, a better way. This is just one experiment of hundreds, but you'll feel the difference. And then I ask you to do your old way, and you feel like, ugh, I don't like it. Ugh, dead fly. I don't never want to turn that way again for the rest of my life. And so, as you play back and forth with that, you will mirrored will be the way you limit yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm not talking about hurting yourself. I'm not talking about like forcing the flexibility too much that you hurt yourself. You'll just say, wow, I only turn my head this much. But if I let my legs and my pelvis and my ribs and my spine spiral and turn, I can turn more and more comfortably. And the
Mhm.
pain goes away. It's very I'll use a seductive, because you're not to seduce another person, but it's seductive in your own body, because you'll be like, wow, sensuously, I like this way of being and living and moving better. So I'll make a lot of jokes, like I'll say, you have a new job of being a sensual scientist. You'll be doing these different experiments and figuring out how to move better. Now,
Mhm.
if you going to, I don't drink alcohol, but if you going to a party, and I joke about it though, because most people would have the turn like this, which is when I teach all around the world, close to 100% of the people turn their head like this. I joke, they'd have to have 4 martinis before they'd start to like let more of their body turn. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you
Mhm.
do it scientifically while you're sober and you turn and you go, wow, that feels so good. I feel like my hips are oiled, my back feels nice. It doesn't have my back pain went away, my neck pain went away. This feels There's two kinds of sensual. There's the sexy meaning of sensual. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk about the inner sensuality, sensing of yourself in
Mhm.
a way that feels nicer. Now, once you've worked on yourself and you've improved your map of yourself, you understand gravity better, you understand how to push on the ground better, the floor, you move with more grace and power and charisma. How is that going to affect your uh, romantic life, your ability to find or attract a partner? A lot.
Mhm.
If you're walking into a party or a meeting and someone's fairly shut down, they've got a big polite smile on their face, but they're very inhibited, they're not graceful, they don't move powerfully, they look uncomfortable. How attractive. I
That
mean, if you're wounded looking for another wounded person, maybe, but I think we have to go towards more health. This is a. I know it's controversial. I know it's radical, but we need to address this to improve our society. We
Mhm.
need less money spent on bombs and more on this should be this could be taught in schools. When I teach with kids, it's really funny. I have them do woodpecker to move their head too far forward and too far back, and they're all laughing and having so much fun. And afterwards, they have beautiful carriage of their head. Probably for the rest of their lives because they've learned something. They've so I call it putting the bad habits on cue. See, when you're a professional dancer and actor and you're in the wings and you're getting the stage manager says go in the wings, get ready, and then they give you your cue, and then at 5, 6, 7, 8 you're supposed to start on the one.
Mhm.
You're doing something. But if you're in an unconscious habit, you don't know that you're doing this unconscious habit. But once you do, see, if I'm doing this, is this my bad habit or am I pantomiming? I'm pantomiming.
Yeah.
This is acting. It's not a bad habit. And so it's on cue. I don't have to do it. When I do it, it feels repulsive and terrible and but kind of funny. And when I don't do it, it feels better. So while you're doing the experiment, that happens. Your bad habits are a new way is shown that feels better. And then I gently tease you a little bit, have you do your old bad habit. And now you're not doing it as a habit, you're deliberately doing it. So that means you have control over it. See, the problem with a habit that's holding trauma is you have no control over it.
Mhm.
It's completely unconscious. Let's call it a blind spot. Okay.
Mhm.
So you're just doing it all the time. And sadly, most people die and they never resolve their trauma. They never change their bad habits. In fact, they start to add more bad habits and they age really fast.
Mhm.
So when you do this fun experiment process that people are laughing and they're just saying, I don't want to turn my head like this anymore. They don't have that bad habit. And we do the same thing. We do everything. We do standing, we do walking, we go how you go down to the ground and up, how you get in and out of bed, how you do your sport, everything. Because, this work evolved from first working on sports injuries, which is working on the highest functioning human beings on the planet to do even better. And first I was help them with their injuries, but then I would help them to jump higher, or martial artists to hit harder, or tennis players to serve faster. So I was enhancing function way up into the ideals. Living in New York are the most extraordinary martial artists, athletes, actors, singers, everything, Metropolitan Opera singers, all of these guys, helping them with their problems, but then also helping to enhance. So I learned all this highest level functioning stuff. And then I just look with compassion where anybody comes in. Like if a old bent over grandma comes in, I don't want her to be dunking basketballs, but I'm using the moving more way that it feels more comfortable. And the grandma says, I never left the house for 10 years. And now I feel so good. I'm going for a walk around the lake for 2 miles. That's a beautiful improvement of the quality of life. And her daughter was crying. I was crying during the Zoom call. Her daughter was translating Russian because my Russian isn't very good. Because this woman who for 40 years had back pain, the grandma was all of a sudden dancing around the room. Oh, my back doesn't hurt. My back doesn't hurt. And I'm crying. Her daughter's crying, who was translating the Russia. It's just really satisfying. I love helping people like that. And to help someone, get out of the house and want to move, want to exercise, not to force themselves to exercise, but just say, I feel so good. I want to move. I want to dance. I want to walk. I want to run. Whatever's appropriate for them. So it was fun to start with that, to have this foundational piece that was involved with higher function. And then in science, we call movement function. And then we call posture, we call structure. So working with improving the structure or the posture and the function or the movement. And then but then also I would have very different clients, like with drug addiction, they felt stuck in their drug addiction, or they were really, really afraid of being suicidal and stuff like that. And with things like suicide and drug addiction and severe depression, there's always 3 thoughts that are not very good quality thoughts. Like, why is this always happening to me? And, oh, this is, terrible. And everything's getting worse. Or, so the person will be walking by a beautiful tree and they won't even see the tree. They could put on Mozart and feel better, but they don't even think to put on Mozart. And whereas when their body improves and their feeling about themselves are improved, they're not looking down at the ground. When your posture is like this, it's easier to look at the ground and you go like, oh God, New York is just full of dog poop and ugly and stuff like that. And when their posture moves, they're seeing further away. They're seeing a bigger world, and they go, wow, there's a lot of beauty. And it's just a different sense of that. And this is how the trauma is released, because the body's not moving in the habit that held it. Like earlier, I'll repeat, what if you could not only untwist the body, but untwist the thinking that twisted the body? And it's not your fault. A lot of the things that are limiting you were put into your brain by maybe a not healthy religion, or a not healthy school system, or an unhealthy parenting and stuff like that. You can love your parents, but you can also understand that there are some ways that you're limited in your thinking because of that. And or you're limited in your body. For example, school or parents could say, like if a boy is walking around, If you look at a really good athlete, the men had this powerful movement in their pelvis.
Mm.
Now, in the schools, that what happens with peers, they could get gay teasing when they were in school, in grade school, or their father could say, "Don't move your hips like that when you walk," because the father's real suppressed and he doesn't move. And then the boy will go, "Oh, I should move my hips when I walk," and then he's going to try to hold his hips to not move so he doesn't look gay. Um, First of all, it's healthy to be gay as someone is. But the worst thing is if anybody's holding their hips, and this also, my gay friends have told me this too. There's a lot of this suppression for gay men to not look gay in school. So that suppression of the pelvis, wham, the power source is gone.
Mm.
So the potency, the potential of the person way down in terms of athletic performance, in terms of charisma, all of that stuff is way, way down. But what's interesting about my experiments is they're non-sexual. So for example, we usually sexualize the movement of the pelvis. But
Mm.
when you were doing this experiment, it was non-sexual at all, but your hand was feeling your pelvis moving a little more. And then when you walked, your pelvis moved better. That's non-sexual.
Mm.
But it will help your healthy sexuality in myriad ways that will be unique to you. For example, I was working with a violinist, and she had a lot of musicians. She had horrible neck and shoulder pain in Germany, and I felt so much better, and she left. And a couple hours later, she called me and she said, "Can you help children that have had sexual trauma, sexual abuse?" And I said, "Sure, but I want the doctors to be there and the security staff and their whole support system has to come and either participate or observe because I want the children to feel safe." And it was so interesting because I did the videotapes. I can't show the videotapes because of confidentiality, because these children were so abused that they were like in witness protection so the father couldn't find them, and so there was confidentiality that I respect. So, but it was very interesting because we just had them walk across the room. It was about uh, 30, uh, 50 feet, and then run back the other way. And the before was like they walk and they run so weird. And in 2 hours, all we did was do this turning and some other experiments. We did a number of experiments, completely non-sexual, just moving their bodies better. Because when you have a sexual trauma like that, there's a cut in the pelvis. There's trauma held around the pelvis, so it interferes with the mechanical movements of the legs and the running and the walking. Okay,
Mm.
so they were just doing all this stuff, and I was so fun. My German is so bad, and they were laughing at my bad German, but we were just having a lot of fun and laughing around. And then at the end, they were walking and running so differently that all the doctors and security guards and I were just weeping of joy, and they were laughing and really enjoying themselves. And I came back 6 months later, and the ones who had worked with me, and there were some new children that had never worked with me, and they were very afraid because I'm a man. Also, they were just very afraid. But the ones who had worked with me before were like, "Oh no, he's funny," and they were just running up and hugging me. And then the new ones felt comfortable, and we could do stuff. And if they can learn something, not learning like teaching, like do the right answer in school. I'm talking about a learning of how to move more gracefully, naturally, powerfully. Uh, that's huge for a child. And that's missing in school. See, it's not the same if you're doing the only movement that you get in school is competitive, which is war. So you put two people in teams and they're fighting with each other. That's a competitive and stress environment. It's fun. I love sports when I was a kid, but it's not the same as this. This is slow down, sensing yourself, doing it less ideal, doing it more ideal, but it's all done in very safe. There's no risk of injury. Of you're not like throwing things at each other or tackling each other where you have to like protect yourself from being injured, or boxing and martial arts like I liked when I was a kid. This is very safe. Like, what's the purpose of a greenhouse? Safety. So this is safe. A lot of the movements are done laying down on the ground because a lot of your tension is you're afraid to fall. So when we're walking, like we're afraid of falling down. I know you don't think you're afraid of falling, but your brain is sampling about 80 times a second to make sure you're not falling, because we evolved from animals and trees. Where falling, you die. And just for an experiment, you want to try an experiment? Stand up and sit down 80 times in 1 second. Now that's how busy your brain is being afraid of falling. So as a scientist, some of the movements will lay down or sit, and you can't fall. You're safe. And then you can feel like when you never feel how do you move your pelvis, or how do you move your head, or how do you reach for something when you're laying down. We just don't usually do it. But as you're doing that, you go, wow, that's really interesting how I can reach through my body, or how I use my legs when I'm laying on my back with the knees bent, how I use my legs to reach my arms. And then when you stand up, the traumatized child will say, oh, I feel safe. I feel safer. It just feels nice. And the tennis player will hit harder. They'll say, wow, somehow my legs are helping me to hit the ball harder. And so it's really fun too, because every experiment I do is a puzzle, and it's a mystery. You don't know what you're going to do, and you don't know how to do it. Why? Because I have to be more creative than you're crazy. I'm not saying that you're crazy. I'm saying we're all a little crazy. But if I can create movements that you've never done before in your life, it's harder for you to use your old bad habits. You have to invent a new way of moving. And then we'll relate that into how you walk and sit and stand and dance or move or whatever you like to do. We call that integration. So what you learn, you say, well, what can I do with that? How can that be useful for my golfing, or for my running, or for my composing music? How I sit at the piano or the computer. How can this change the way, like if you have a fluid pelvis while you're working at the computer for 8 hours, when you finish 8 hours of work, you feel like dancing. But if you have dead legs and a collapsed pelvis, and your pelvis is dead, it's absolutely not involved with the computer, your head is sagging, your whole body's uncomfortable, you're going to finish 8 hours of work and you go, oh God, I just want to drink and to sit on the couch and watch TV, Netflix, whatever. You know what I mean? And how does that affect your romantic life, your emotional life, your productivity, the amount of love you can give and receive? It's very different as you learn these things. And, I'd much rather, be more fluid and active and feel like if I work on my book for a few hours, I'm not destroying my posture and I'm not making it harder to breathe and harder for the blood flow to my brain. This actually makes you less intelligent because it's harder for the blood to flow and nourish your brain. And this posture is easier to breathe. If I gave you a 60-pound bag of potatoes and it was on your chest, how good is your breathing going to be? How good is your pulmonary function of your heart to go to your brain? It's all compromised.
Right. Now, there's the movement that, the exercises that you're sharing at the same time. You
Not
also,
exercises.
huh?
not
What?
exercises.
Movement. Okay, sorry.
They're experiments. See,
Experiments.
everyone else teaches exercises.
Okay.
I
But
love exercising, but let me talk about the difference for a second. If
okay.
someone's doing physical therapist, they give you an exercise, do 100 of these, 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 and what's your percentage of compliance going to be, high or low?
Low. Mm-hmm.
Most people low. What's the percentage you're going to be doing with your old bad habits, high or low?
Higher.
Higher.
Yeah.
What's the percentage that you're going to be present while you're doing them? High or low?
Low. Mm-hmm.
You're going to be fantasizing about something or thinking about everything you got to do. But if I say, Ben, here's an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
How can you use your legs to turn your head?
Yeah.
Now that's a question. It's not a command. Do this, do this, do this, do this. It's a question. So if I'm saying, how can you use your legs to turn your head? And it only takes you 30 seconds. I say, you only have to do this 30 seconds. What's your level of compliance going to be? Because it feels good.
Right.
Why? What's your level of doing it with your own bad habits? Gone.
Gone. Mm-hmm.
What's your percentage of being present? High.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're engaged with answering a question. Now, what's your level of intelligence in enhancement? High. Whereas if you're just doing repetitive, I love exercising. I love to exercise, but I do it very mindfully. But most exercises, your level of intelligence is not appreciably going to increase. But through these experiments, your actual intelligence increases because your physical body intelligence increases, which is caused by the brain. See, your physical body intelligence improves. This is not a very intelligent way of posture or turning your head. It's damaging you and it's making you old faster. I call it the avalanche of aging.
Yeah.
And so when you start to move better, you have actually increased in mental intelligence and by physical intelligence. And all my clients talk about that. They're all saying about how they're doing better in their work, their intelligence has increased, their relationships have increased. They're taking more risks if they go to the party, they'll go up and talk to the person that they're attracted to. And they'll feel more confident doing it. So there's
Yeah.
yeah,
What I wanted to touch on, though, for a minute is you actually do a lot of intensive work on the body to release those chronic patterns, just the chronic tension where the body's locked up. And one thing I really like about that is, as I mentioned before too, is that like on one hand, I've experienced a lot of deep tissue body work, but there's limits. There are so many ways in which typical massage doesn't release a lot of these chronic tension patterns. But the emotions that come out too, as you're doing the physical release, is that when those emotions are held in the body, and we were talking about how there's much of this is unconscious, it's outside of conscious awareness, but it creates this filter through which we perceive everyone and everything. And so to bring these emotions up and to make them conscious, then it's it's like you see how that filter through which you've viewed other people in the world and yourself and your whole experience of life and all that, and um, and the importance too of being able to work constructively with your emotions, because with the experiments that you're sharing and with uh, the, the deep intensive work where you're releasing the traumas within the body, um, you know what mentioned earlier too is that when you can work constructively with your emotions, um, then the body becomes a whole lot more malleable and able to, instead of just reverting back to the old patterns, it's when you could be conscious and work with those emotions, then your body's and mind overall are better able to transition into this much healthier mode of expression. We've been going about 90 minutes, so we want to be a little mindful of time. Also, there's a little challenge of editing here, but what would you like to add in
Sure,
conclusion here?
sure. The,
What would you like to wrap up with here?
Sure. Well, the difference see, if you're just doing deep tissue work and you're just finding tense spot and you're just rubbing them, rubbing them, rubbing them, and releasing them, this
Mm,
is wonderful. And sometimes people will cry or laugh or a lot of night, and they'll walk down the street afterwards and they'll feel more open and stuff like that. But
mm,
if you don't address the posture, like you can't, it's impossible to not be tense in your neck and shoulders if your head is here.
mm,
If I'm holding a ballerina up here, it's fun. But if I was holding a ballerina out here, like you're holding your head, it's
mm,
going to be heavy. So
exactly.
you're going to get tense again. It's not going to be a permanent change. But
Yeah.
if you really, if as a practitioner, if you're very scientifically improving posture and structure and function, it's much more permanent change, and it's
Right.
even aggressive.
Mm,
And so the issue is, so when I'm doing the private sessions with, there's two ways I'm working. Sometimes I'm working very gently moving the bones, and
mm,
you feel a less neurotic and more effortless way of moving and being.
mhm,
The other way I'll work is I'll press very deeply to release the tensions and work in the fascial layers, between the fascial layers. Like if you, so ideally the muscles work more compartmentalized so they can slide and do their job. So they can make tiny little differences in your movements. But
mm,
the more trauma there is, the more the fascial layers stick together and the movement gets awkward or limited.
mhm,
The thinking becomes somewhat more limited. And as I'm going through, you're moving while I'm doing it. So we're freeing it up together. And
mm,
then you feel, wow, I move better and my posture is better. And I like this posture better. It
mhm,
feels good. It feels very pleasurable. And your movement feels better. So the effect is cumulative. Like it it feels better, and so you want to be that way. You don't want to go back to your old way of being because it feels uncomfortable. But now you can do it by choice. You understand the way to do the difference. And I always rehearse you doing it wrong because I for 10 years I was fixing stuff and people would keep messing it up. And then I was sitting on a rock in the middle of a river in India, in Ganges, and it's a fun place to have realizations. And I'm meditating in the middle of this river, and I said, "Oh, you have to teach people how to do it wrong."
mm,
And so then it really transformed my work because they were doing it not ideally for this example. And so I had to show them this, but then I had to actually teach them how they were making their paint. And then once they knew that, it's very empowering for you because then you don't do it. Because
right.
you know how to do it wrong, you don't do it. But if it's your habit doing it wrong, you have no control, you have no chance of changing it unless there's some kind of intervention, meaning a new experience or a new experiment or a new philosophy. All of these are the important next steps. So I think the important thing is to make it safe, to
Right.
create a safe environment, and to make it fun and to make it interesting and to make it a pleasure. Because if I can create something that is only takes you like 30 seconds to 3 minutes to help to have a lot of benefit, it's fun to do and you like to do it. Um,
Right.
Yes. So if people would like to be in touch with me, we can put some links to the website. And also, I have a Facebook group, which is a lot of fun experiments. They're called 3-minute miracles, where if you'd like to feel good when you're at the computer, you just go to the Facebook and click on one of the videos, and it's something fun and funny. Sometimes I'm doing a little bit of stand-up comedy with a skeleton at the beginning, which is hysterical. And you just try the different movements and they feel nice. And if you'd like to do a session either in person with me, I have a practice in New York City, Bali, and in Ajijic, Mexico. And you can also do Zoom sessions. I can help with all of these things by Zoom sessions online. So we'll put my contact information, uh, the links below.
We do that. You want to share too? In addition to putting links below, do you want to share on the video itself?
Sure. My name is Tyr Throne. You can read it on the screen. And Tyr Throne is my email at gmail.com. It's also my Facebook, and it's also my Instagram. And and the work is called Somalogy, Somalogy, SOMALOGY.com. And the website is being updated right now, but it'll be back up soon.
Very good. I very much appreciate your joining me today. And
thanks, Ben. It's such a pleasure with you. I feel you understand the work deeply, and it's really I love your energy, and it's really a pleasure sharing about this with you.
yeah, I'm looking forward to more sessions too. Um, so to be continued. And thank you again. And we'll wrap up for today. Thank you everyone for joining us, who are
My
joining us.
pleasure. Please email me feedback. I would love to hear from you, from the viewers.
Sounds good. Yeah, and if anyone, you could also ask me, because I have Tyr's contact information, so I could pass that on to you as well. So, okay, thank you again, everyone, and bye for now.